Alright, let's go on to the second episode of Season 4 of Fargo, which is titled The Land of Taking and Killing, which immediately starts off with something that I was expecting to be another visual Coen Brothers reference, and it may very well still be. We're starting with a prison break, where we kind of get the shot of the prison in the distance, and then the escapees coming out, which I don't know about anybody else, but immediately makes me think of Raising Arizona, of course. I was actually kind of expecting like a full-on recreation of the shot of Goodman coming out. Though we do kind of get a similar thing going on when he reached in and pulled William Forsythe out by his leg. Is kind of what's going on here. And these characters are characters we have obviously never seen before. And it is in true Fargo fashion that this is how they would be introduced to us. So once we immediately learn who they are, that being the aunt of Ethelreda and her sidekick of sorts, or partner or lover or something. I think it's kind of all of the above. We have the aunt who is Zelmare and the other who is Swanee Caps. Obviously, very memorable names is a good way to go as far as introducing new characters, because we do have a few introductory characters here, as well as Jack Houston has made his way into it now, playing what appears to be an OCD detective of sorts. They don't really identify it as OCD, but it seems apparent that it's something along those lines. And he's got this sort of double duty thing going on where we see him investigating a crime, and then we see the fact that he also happens to work for the Fata family. So I'm only assuming that'll be in Schwartzman's favor in certain ways as it goes on, but it's hard to, with dirty cops, you can never quite tell, especially if Jack Houston is playing them. One of the ultimate untrustworthy faces in both movies and TV, which he always plays brilliantly. So, not a knock on Jack Houston the person. But as far as Jason Schwartzman goes, we are getting a lot more in regards to sort of Josto's development a little bit. I guess it's much easier to call him by his character's name. It's significantly less syllables. And what was really interesting about this, that's really, I kind of figured this is the direction it was going, but it's nice to kind of see it a bit confirmed, and that is the fact that just when you look at Jason Schwartzman, he doesn't really look like he belongs in this kind of environment or this kind of role, but we pretty much quickly realized that that's pretty much the point, especially when we see that he's not entirely capable of pulling off all of his plans. Like, he's still after Dr. Harvard for his father being rejected from the hospital they tried to go to, and the hit on him fails spectacularly, in truly spectacular black comedy fashion that goes right in with this show and the Coen Brothers inspiration. But I do think that's also a great contrast, that when you see Jason Schwartzman and you immediately think, oh, he doesn't really belong in this type of role, or seemingly, on the opposite side of that, it's so interesting how Chris Rock in his role feels so natural. It's one of those cases where you're like, oh, that's, an inspired casting choice. Let's see what Chris Rock would do in a role like this. And it feels like a role that he's, lived in forever, despite it kind of being a bit of a different thing, even though I talked about in the last episode about how his roles and stuff like Nurse Betty kind of felt like it was headed in that direction. But that was still a almost primarily comedic role anyway. But with him playing it pretty much totally stone-faced, that he's the kind of character that seems really sort of cool in the face of potential threats or potential escalating violence or something like that. But he also kind of, in a conversation we see with Dr. Senator later, kind of has a bit of a reckless nature in regards to the decisions that he makes. So it's sort of in the moment he seems really cool and calculated, but he'll make decisions from a distance that might really complicate things later. Particularly this whole thing with this very seemingly not great idea of just trying to get the Fadas to assume that the slaughterhouse is theirs. But something that's going to really throw a wrench into this is the arrival of the brother of Josto that was kind of built up in the previous episode, Gaetano. And the interesting thing about him immediately, just as soon as you see him, and he seems like you immediately get the sense that he's doing like John Polito in Miller's Crossing, or at least something to that extent, but still kind of his own character. That this is going to be somebody that's like the loose cannon type, and there's going to seriously be a power struggle here where we've got the contrast of Gaetano that's right at home in this kind of thing, and he's like he almost has too much control over these type of situations, and factor that in with the fact that Josto doesn't feel like he belongs here at all. Like we get the scene when he's talking to his future father-in-law, and he just kind of the offhand way he talks to him and talks about impregnating his daughter and stuff like that. It's like you can tell that Josto's one of those people that knows he's out of his element, so he's trying to almost compensate for that in a way of like he'll show power to just about anybody he possibly can in any way he possibly can. So that's the vibe I got from that scene with the showing off his fiance and stuff like that. That's clearly another crowd that he just doesn't. It's like it's weird how Joster doesn't seem to belong with like anybody. And it's like the most he's really seemed to show any sort of actual connection with somebody was in the first episode when he and Jesse Buckley did drugs. So of course, if there's one character that he seems most connected to, and it's a character he's barely had any interaction with, it's the most unhinged character in the show so far, anyway. I know Gaetano's kind of giving her a run for her money in that regard, but there's just something so weird and off about Jessie Buckley's character that I really love that like just continues to draw me in. Like she was the biggest takeaway I took from the first episode, and it's still going on here, especially when we get this new development that seems like it's sort of cutting something off immediately, where we see the way, like when she killed Donatello, for instance, and it's like, oh, this is her thing apparently, especially with the way she took his ring, but then she goes to do it again and just like immediately gets caught, and it's like, oh, all right, so she's not as, I guess, smooth as she kind of came off, but then there's the moment when she like basically talks herself into getting a severance pay, and then if that's not enough, somehow this sort of devolves into like God and judgment and heaven and hell or something. It's like this character is so far off her fucking rocker that I really can't wait to see. This is only episode 2, and I'm like dying to know where this character goes. And it's like even if she's just the type that just kind of wreaks havoc. I was like we were talking about. I kind of somewhat compared her to Lorne Malvo in the last video, and that's like, I mean, obviously he had a particular job or jobs, but she just seems to be wreaking chaos for no other reason than she wants to, and that's the more dangerous and unpredictable type. Especially when she gets these really creepy moments when she's talking to Ethelrita, because we already know that she's weirdly drawn to Ethelrita after the end of the last episode when she was just watching her through the window, and it's like, what the fuck is that? And now she's actually come over and told her that she's going to make her a special project. She has no filter whatsoever when it comes to Ethelrita, whether it be the racism or just straight up saying weird shit to her. I mean, obviously she seems like that kind of character anyway, especially as we saw with her now former boss, but it's different with Ethelrita. I don't know if it's because Ethelrita's a younger character, that she seems like she can be more like whatever the fuck she is around her and to her directly, which takes it in a really interesting direction when we see her poison a pie that she's going to give to her, and I honestly just love how up in the air these motives are. And I like the fact that like it would almost be frustrating if not for the fact that we're so early in the season, so I'm like there's still plenty of room to get hyped to figure out where exactly this is going to go or to see where it's going to go. I'm not even going to try to figure it out, at least at this point. But and like even just like her physicality, like the way she walks is so fucking bizarre and creepy, and just everything about her is off. It's almost like she's otherworldly compared to everything else around her. So yeah, she's the one definitely performance and character wise that I'm like really interested in seeing where the hell this goes. But we also have the stuff with Dr. Senator going to the slaughterhouse and stuff like that. And what I love about Dr. Senator is that he's one of those characters that feels like he's obviously important, especially with Loy's character, but the way he would almost be like kind of a background character or something, like a Tom Hagen or something, where he's just kind of he's kind of getting things moving in the background without necessarily seeming like he's really the head of anything. But there's just something so quietly badass about him that I feel like we've only gotten just a sliver of what his importance is going to be. And when they have this whole sort of standoff, like I said, he's like, much like Loy, he's like really stone-faced in the face of tension. And that really comes to light in this slaughterhouse scene where, like, we've got kind of a standoff going on, and there's the bolt gun or whatever it is that keeps going off in the background. And it's like the way that tension just keeps building. Like, there's almost something comedic to how tense it is, with all this stuff going on in the background. And it's like, and like anybody that would be too reactionary would just cause chaos in a moment like this. But that hasn't happened yet, but I would not be surprised if we get something along the lines that results in a shitload of bloodshed, because that's just typically what comes with the territory. The genre this season is kind of going for. So I guess really the last thing to mention is the character we are introduced to at the very end of the episode, like the very last couple of seconds, where Timothy Oliphant finally shows his face. And he appears to be a cop, and I'm pretty sure Jack Houston was in there with him when they came up to the door, and we're assuming of Ethelrita's house. And this kind of gets the mind going a little bit, because number one, there's the question of who's going to end up eating the pie, and the other question is, what are the cops doing busting into this house that otherwise has this normal family in it? Because the obvious reason would be because of Zelmare and Swanee, like because they broke out and now they've been tracked down and caught would be. But I just feel like that just seems too simple, like like I don't know, but I really don't know what else it could be. Something that we don't even know about yet that'll be revealed in the third episode. But I mean realistically, that's probably what it has to be, but there's just something that has me thinking it might be more unexpected than that. But we'll see. But as far as the pie, I would, if I also had to guess, I would say it would end up in one of the cops' hands. Like if it's just sitting there and the cops are like walking around the house or whatever. Yeah, but I don't think it's going to actually get to its intended target, being apparently Ethelrita, assuming she's the intended target, because obviously she knows an entire family lives there. But like I said, to even try to go into what the hell Jesse Buckley could possibly be doing is something I just can't wait to see. So yeah, I would say overall that I'm hooked to this season already. I feel like I have a lot more. I know a lot of people really love season 2, but I was kind of on and off in how into season 2 I was. But I feel like this one, especially with the genre that they've gone for, the kind of gangster kind of thing in that era, is got me a bit more hooked than I usually have been. So probably is the most I've been since season 1. So yeah, I mean, it's because it's one of the cases where when I started doing this, it was like, is this like, I'm just going to be stuck doing these videos now all the way to the end if I decide that I'm not really that into it. But I'm not worried about that right now. I feel like that I'm going to be into this at least for a while, and we'll definitely want to know where it goes. And a lot of these characters we're even getting little tastes of. Like, we haven't even really seen Timothy Oliphant yet, apart from just that one moment of him going to the house. So he's definitely somebody I can't wait to see more of also. And, yeah, so is that pretty much it for this episode, I think? So we will go on to episode 3, and we will continue the long line of reviews that are coming out. So until all that stuff, I think that's it.